You want to tell folks where they can find us?
What? That's your job.
Yeah, it is my job.
You're having too much fun playing with all the buttons.
I am pushing buttons. Yo, what's good? What's good, everybody? I am Yo Big Rube.
And I'm your girl, Sherry J.
And this is another Fireside Chat presented by SexTech and Chill. Today we have an incredible lineup of folks. We're going to be talking about a dope theme called the Good Girl Trap, and we're focused on liberation from the Good Girl Trap. Joining us today is going to be Tyomi Morgan, Norma Buster, and Karneshia Shantel. And Tyomi is a sexologist and pleasure coach. Norma Buster is a sex-positive victims' rights advocate and survivor of image-based abuse. Karneshia Shantel is an ADA consultant and aspiring OnlyFans entrepreneur. You know this conversation is going to be dope.
So we're going to just jump right in. And in a minute, I'm going to ask y'all to each share what the Good Girl Trap means to you, like how you would define it, especially in terms of like when it comes to sexuality. But before we do that, we want to bring up a quick clip from one of our followers on Instagram who answered the question for us, because I think it's going to set the tone nicely for why we're all here today.
What is the Good Girl Trap? So this was inspired by a post, a question from SexTech and Chill. And honestly, the Good Girl Trap is where I currently am. Thinking, believing that if I did everything right, I lived life by the book, quote unquote, live by their rules, whoever they is, I could have it all. And then one day I wake up or have woken up with nothing to show for my good girl efforts. And it really sucks because now I am mourning the me that could have been and never was. Let's be clear. I am extremely grateful for many of the experiences I've had in my life. I'm grateful for my 2 degrees and the friendships that I've fostered, the lessons I've learned. But at the same time, there is a grieving that is happening because I'm just not who I thought I would be by now.
I don't know about y'all, but that was very relatable for me. A shout out to Unapologetically Drea on Instagram. Thank you so much for sharing that response with us. And I promise you that you are not alone in those feelings. And I can pretty much guarantee that almost everyone on this panel today has felt that way at least one time in their life, which is why we're here. And why, Karneshia, I was so glad that you brought up this topic a few months ago when we had you on last time. With that being said, do you want to kick us off with sharing how you define the Good Girl Trap?
I think that I define the Good Girl Trap as being skeptical about pursuing things that you know you want to do in your heart, or worried about what perception of the media will think about you because of a position that you have or a stance that you take on real life issues, and thinking that people probably won't take you serious because now you out here being too sexy. And so that's where I kind of straddle the fence with it.
So the way that I define the good girl trap is this idea that women are supposed to behave and show up and appear a particular way. So it's these kind of there's religious and even cultural like upstanding rules that women are supposed to adhere to, and it's rooted in respectability politics as well. And it's a policing of our behaviors, it's a policing of our image and how we interact in the world with our bodies. And then like that young lady said in the quote, there's this idea that if you do all of these things, if you adhere to all of these cultural and religious rules, that there is a prize at the end of that, which is you're going to be put on a pedestal, you're going to be praised and revered above all other women, and you're going to be set aside. And it kind of like flows into the Madonna horror complex. It's the same kind of a thing where If you keep yourself chaste, if you keep yourself upright and blameless, then boom, you're going to have everything that you want. But really, it's just restricting, and it prevents women from really feeling like they have autonomy over their lives and over their decisions. And it's just a form of control. And unfortunately, all of us at some point that identify as femme have been underneath these rules. And when we get to the point in realizing that this is all a farce, that there is no standards by which we should be holding ourselves, often there is disappointment and feelings of like sadness. And so I'm happy we're talking about this today.
Same. I was in my 30s before I started getting any kind of loosening of that grip from it. So I totally get it. I understand. How about you, Norma?
Yeah, I can relate to this in so many ways on a personal and professional level. It kind of reminds me of the whole like perfect victim idea, right? That like the so often victims of various forms of sexual violence are not taken seriously. They experience victim blaming, and anything they possibly do or say that is contrary to the perfect victim, so called, or like that doesn't fall into this good girl trap, like these rules that we have around how people are supposed to be, um, you know, they don't get taken seriously and it gets used against them. And I think it's really harmful, you know, not just for victims of various forms of violence, but also for like people healing and just becoming who they are and figuring out what they want to do. I grew up in a very Christian Cuban home, so there's definitely this idea of how women and girls are like supposed to be, and the way I live my life today definitely does not adhere to that at all. But it is sort of a mourning of like who you thought you would be, but then realizing that like who you are now is so much more, I don't know, for me at least, I feel so much more in line with who I am once I shed that.
For me, like as long as I can remember, it was about being the perfect wife, the perfect wifey, the perfect mother, and always being to the Drea's point on Instagram. She had posted some additional notes on her post, and it's about always being something for somebody else first, and you look up and you realize that you live your life for other people and it's not about you anymore, and it wasn't you in control or making the decisions. And that's how it was very much for me as well. And to the point where it was very stifling of just trying to exist in the world. I felt like I was just trying to be just being a woman was like somehow that was wrong because I couldn't ever do it right. There was always just something going against being that good girl inside of me. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it because hearing hearing what y'all are saying, I can't help but think of like what Tyomi, kind of echo what Tyomi said and then Norma said, talking about the grieving and having lived your life for so many other people and other people had so much say, and then the tie up with respectability politics. Then you look up and you're like, what did I do all that for? And then I can't help but think the fact that when something goes wrong, all the things you were supposed to do from respectability politics was supposed to be the thing that either kept you safe or brought you to things you want. And then you find out, lo and behold, nah, it didn't do anything. So why are we adhering to this? And I know that like, obviously women get it significantly more extreme and in a very specific amount of ways. But I think, at least from my experience growing up a man in a super religious community, we had our own scripts to adhere to, and the good boy trap, as it were, like, and realizing that none of that stuff actually worked. It didn't keep me safe. It didn't make me happy. It didn't make me a better partner. And then it's like, and then when you put how we're encouraged to see women and see spouses, doesn't help our relationship with any woman, especially like in my case with my spouse. And it's like, you look up and it's like, what was all that for? Like all the things they promised, none of it worked out the way that that we were promised it would. I got a question for you that I was curious to hear your point of view based on your expertise, because you're a sexologist, Tyomi, and a pleasure coach working with folks. When you think about, like, in a context of the good girl trap, what is some common stuff that you see showing up in your interactions with the folks who you work with, as far as like how it influences their relationship to pleasure specifically? And then do you see any differences when it comes to like factors like race, religious background, and upbringing, and how the good girl crap kind of like manifests itself in the folks you work with as your clients?
So I have to preface that my primary demographic are Black women, African American women. So I cannot necessarily lend my opinion to how it shows up in different races. Even though I do have clients in the group coaching setting that are not from the African diaspora, but I do have to preface that most of my experience is with people who look like me. And so how I see this show up is as a well, first of all, they don't really feel that they have a right to experience pleasure, and there's always a default directly to sexual pleasure, but pleasure comes in four different forms. We have sensual pleasure, emotional, and spiritual. And so just in the options that they have for how they express themselves and how they dress and how they show up, how they wear their hair, even in how they walk throughout life. I remember growing up, my aunties and grandmothers would be like, don't poke your chest out. That's being fast. When really it's just proper posture. So if you have protruding breasts, it just can't you can't help but your breasts are just out there, but having your shoulders rolled back and your chest up, being seen as, oh, you're doing something bad, that's a no-no, just creates this closeted kind of a person where everything is like turned inward. And so I've seen so many women feel like they don't have a right to access pleasure in any form. And when it comes to sexual pleasure, they really do not feel comfortable expressing themselves. They really do not feel comfortable with even talking or even thinking about sex. And a lot of them do, like when they get to the point where they realize that they're not doing anything wrong, they feel frustrated, they feel lost, and they feel like they don't know where to begin in even exploring their sexuality. And so that's where I come in empowering them and reminding them that they have personal autonomy, and encouraging them to take baby steps based on what they feel comfortable doing. So just giving them some options and saying, hey, these things are available to you. What feels comfortable to you right now to step into? And then consulting them and giving them some ideas on how they can move into those spaces in a way that feels safe for them, and then checking in afterwards and saying, hey, how did that work out for you? And just helping them along the path. And then they look up a year later and they're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm able to access, a deeper amount of pleasure. And I always tell people too, like, there's a full spectrum of things that can be experienced mentally, physically, um, within the sexual spectrum. And just because it exists doesn't mean it's for you. And so there is a lot of unwiring of all the programming that's come from, organized religion, that's come from cultural things that came from their parents or from their elders, that sometimes, with the good girl complex, it's this idea that you're being defiant against the people who raised you, defiant against your religious community and even your culture, by saying, I'm not going to accept this anymore and I'm going to find my own way. So, showing up in support of women who are on that journey to break away from that good girl syndrome is also showing up and holding them and saying, hey, like, you're literally not going, your life isn't going to end just because you decide to step away from these things. And sometimes they might be ostracized from the groups that they're used to being in, and showing them that there is life beyond that and life that they get to create for themselves is really like how I show up in support of them. And it's not necessarily the easiest of roads to travel, but it is very fulfilling and rewarding when they can access their own thoughts and their own feelings around, what's happening in the world around them and how they get to express themselves erotically.
Oh, I appreciate that. You said about support. How could someone show up to support? Like if like being a man to a woman partner, how could I show up, or how could any a male partner for a woman or a femme who experience, because obviously I think in this culture most femme presenting people are going to experience this at least in some way or another. How can we show up for support? If you have anything in mind, I know I'm kind of like catching you off guard with that one, but
The first thing that can be done is holding empathetic space and compassion, because what I've seen is, I get like male clients who come to me and they're frustrated that their wives or their spouses or significant others, even if they aren't married, um, don't take to a particular thing sexually that they want them to enjoy. And so it's always prefaced with, how can I get her to fill in the blank, right? And the first thing is realizing, like, don't center her pleasure around what you want. Show up and really ask the questions of, where are you at right now? What are you feeling and what are you needing? And if there is apprehension towards something, become curious about that and ask the questions. Why does this make you feel uncomfortable? You know, how can I help you? Is this something that you're actually interested in? And if not, okay, then where can we reach a middle ground or a compromise where both people are able to feel like they're receiving what they need out of the situation, and not it's not one-sided. But compassion and empathy are the first things that men really need to approach the situation with, and take their ego out of it. It's not about you. Yes, you have desires. Yes, you want to enjoy your person in this particular way, but when you make it about you, instead of really seeing that person and what they're going through and becoming curious and asking those questions to help, get them into a space of support, then they're just going to feel like you're no different than their mother, father, pastor, grandmother, whomever has just pushed things onto them and said, you have to do this in order to be loved by me. Because that's really the basis of the good girl syndrome, is you have to do these particular things in order to be accepted by these individuals. And we go with it because we want to be accepted and we want to be loved. And those are human needs, right? Belonging and acceptance. So take your ego out of it, center her, really hear her, set aside quality time with no distractions, no phones, the game isn't on. Literally make the time about catering to her needs. And if you need to, bring a pen and some paper and jot down notes, because you might not remember everything. And if you're all up here just thinking about yourself, and you're not coming from like a heart-based space, you're definitely not going to be hearing what she's saying. So bring a notepad so you can write things down in the conversation, and then be able to come back and check in on that at a later time after she's gone through and done some work.
I appreciate that. So what I'm hearing is from a male, from for men receiving this, is decentering ourselves, thinking about the fact that when she's hearing all this negative messaging and she's hearing this critical messaging and these controlling cultural narratives, what that does to her, and to understand that it's going to require us to decenter ourselves and be more empathetic, and think about what would that feel like for us? What would it feel like to have someone telling you what you can wear, how you can walk? I can't help but think about, remember being in church and they used to have that red light, green light talk, and literally telling you how you can walk. Oh, this is too sexy. Your hip shake, like they just went so extreme on it. And like, you can't
Is that
flip that.
Pentecostal?
It's probably very similar. Jehovah Witnesses, like it was
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you heard,
Okay.
it was real intense. But I can't help but think, like, the reality is, like, you can't just flip those things off, like that messaging just doesn't turn off like a light switch. That takes time. It's like either heating a pot of water, or heating up the ocean, depending on how long you were there and how much of that you internalize. So for men, we have to understand that, and be thinking about what is our partner going through. And I think, to add to what you would say, I would say, like, we would benefit from doing a lot of education on our side, even outside of our partner. Like, if I was going to recommend, bell hooks was a great one for me, but there's other ones as well that I think were incredibly helpful. I don't want to
I was
monopolize
going
this
to say, can I
conversation.
add to what you all are saying too? From personal
Absolutely.
experience, we've kind of been through the gamut of of all of the things, the good, bad, and the ugly parts.
Word.
So like when coming out of that and trying to change my own mindset, when we were younger and you would push because you were just like, I want this, and I'm like, it would just turn me totally dead, and I'm like, don't stop telling me what to do. Everyone's telling me what to do. But then when it flipped and it became more like positive affirmation, then it's like, oh, I noticed this thing, or like you notice me get all cute, but in a way that makes me uncomfortable because I'm not used to being in public looking at cute. And you're like, put your shoulders up, like hold your shoulders up, you look good, baby. Like supporting the efforts when your partner is making that effort, knowing how difficult it is for them or uncomfortable. Another thing for me was like in the bedroom, using my voice at all, making noise, dirty talk, any of that stuff is all part of the same thing. That's where like the Madonna horror complex thing came in very big for me as well. It was like, I can't be wifey and mommy and be this at the same time. I can't do all those things. And I would just be quiet. And it was like when I would start doing little things and you would just like encourage me and be supportive about it rather than pushing, that went such a long way. And it was just, it's slow. And that's the other thing too, we got to realize it can be slow. Not everyone can come out of their old mindset and just jump into the deep end and be like, this is who I am and this is what I want to be, and I'm excited and thrilled to be here and I want to do all the things. Some of us are like baby steps, super baby steps, and the more positive feedback and reinforcement that we get, the better, and the further we'll go.
I appreciate that. We talked about a lot just right out in the open too. We like tackle things head on, and I think that's a big thing too, is you got to talk out in the open about it. If I could switch gears, I wanted to ask you, Norma, you're a victims' rights advocate. You also are a survivor of image-based abuse. How have you seen in the work that you do, how have you seen the good girl mentality play into society's judgment of women and their sexual expression, especially folks in cases where survivors are getting shamed for their private content, haven't been made public, especially when it was without their consent? Like, can you share a little bit about that from your experience?
Yeah, so I am chief of staff at CA Goldberg, which is a victims' rights law firm in Brooklyn. And we have attorneys licensed in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and California. I started here almost 7 years ago doing intake and have kind of worked my way up. So now I meet with potential clients. I oversee our operations and marketing of the firm. And in my career, I've met with thousands of victims of various forms of sexual violence and tech facilitated abuse. And what's so common is that, like, with this crime in particular of image-based sexual abuse, which, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, we used to call it revenge porn. So the non-consensual sharing of intimate images. And we don't call it revenge porn anymore because it's not revenge, it's abuse. There's nothing you could do to deserve that. And it's not porn because porn is consensual. So image-based sexual abuse is a crime that's meant to shame a person into silence and specifically using their sexuality against them. So often it happens in the context of like intimate partner violence or like after a breakup, but other times it's not. Sometimes it's someone who just happens to get their hands on someone's images, or somebody who is sharing, for example, like an OnlyFans content that's behind a paywall without their consent. And so when I meet with survivors, so often the work that I'm doing, because I can't provide legal advice, I'm not an attorney. I'm also not a mental health professional. So I'm there to get the information about what's going on, but I also know that as somebody who might be the first person who's ever listened to them tell what they're going through, it's really important how I react. And I can either leave them feeling worse and judged and victim blamed, like I did when I went through it and went to the police, or I can leave them feeling like they were listened to and heard and that it's actually not their fault. And they were able to hear that from somebody who doesn't even know them. And that's what my boss, Carrie Goldberg, who was my lawyer back then, told me. The first thing she said to me was, "This isn't your fault." And I think when you go through a violation like this, it can make you feel really like disgusted with yourself, because you're just like, this was meant to be private. It's not for the world. And suddenly your image is out of your control. You know, people don't know if you did start that Pornhub page, for example. And if you did, it's okay. Like, we shouldn't be shaming sex workers either. But the point is, it's out of your control. There wasn't consent. And so many victims are blamed for ever having sent a naked photo, even to one person who they were in an intimate relationship with. So, of course, you can imagine for sex workers who have their content shared without their consent, the amount of victim blaming that happens there. So for some, they're like, I don't even know if I should be asking for help. Like, I feel like I might have done something wrong. And then add to it whatever is going on in their life outside of the situation can compound it. So depending on if they're like in a specific religious community, or if they're in a conservative home or environment, as much as I can tell somebody that it doesn't matter what judgments people have on them, they're going to be treated differently. And I'm not there like to fight against the stigma with them. So it's something that is a constant battle. I do think, you know, there's this rise of like talking about deep fakes. So like artificially generated or manipulated images to make somebody look like they are performing a sex act, or that they're naked when they just have an image of their photo. Oftentimes using a sex worker's body in labor without their consent and putting somebody else's face on it. But there's like a media fascination with talking about deepfakes. And I've noticed that the media really wants to talk to victims of deepfakes in a way that is even more like, we had to fight so hard to get people to pay attention to image-based abuse where the person did initially share that naked image of themselves. And they're all problems. It's all bad. It's all violating. But when we talk about something like deepfakes, I want to make sure that we're not separating who's a victim, right? Like creating a new form of the perfect victim.
I really appreciate that. Every time I hear the term perfect victim, I think about how they kind of like came up with the idea of, if we set up this, for folks who don't already know, I first became acquainted with it back in the early 1990s when it came out with the racial stops and stuff.
Federal judge ruled today New York City police have violated the rights of thousands of people with a stop and frisk policy. The tactic is allowed based on a reasonable suspicion of wrongdoing, but the judge said officers stopped mostly black and Hispanic men using questionable criteria. So the policy intentionally discriminates based on race. Mayor Michael Bloomberg denied that charge, and he said the policy is a vital deterrent to crime.
And like, if we find someone who's absolutely above reproach, and we can prove that if it could happen to this person, then somehow there's no justification for it. But the problem is that bar doesn't even make sense, because there's no such thing as perfection. And then what you're saying is communicating is nobody else is like due justice or autonomy or respect and all that. So I really appreciate that you keep calling that out, like calling out that framing is problematic just in and of itself. Thank you very much.
Did you want to share a little bit about what it was like for you to go from being a victim of the image-based abuse into becoming an OnlyFans model yourself, and like how empowering and liberating that was? And then also, a second half of the question is like how you navigated that on a professional level.
Yeah. So I had my images shared without my consent back in 2015, after months of my ex-boyfriend stalking me and threatening me with these images, and then finally he did it. Um, and I was 19 years old at the time. And a few years later, started working for Carrie Goldberg at her firm, really wanting to turn what I'd been through into something powerful, if I could, something positive that could help others. And over the years, being in New York City, met more and more sex workers, became more like personally and professionally ingrained within like the sex positive community here in New York City, and started to learn more about like decriminalization and sex workers' rights and how these things were impacting our clients who are sex workers, and really learning a lot. And um, kind of challenging some of the things that I was hearing in activist spaces. Um, the image based abuse world can kind of become like sort of anti porn by some groups and some, organizations. And so it's really important to me that that doesn't happen in our movement. And so I like hadn't even considered it for myself. And I realized that I hadn't even given myself the permission to consider for myself whether it was something I wanted to do. Wasn't until I met two other adult content creators, Christy Chambers and Megan Sims, who are also survivors and had like helped change laws and had landmark cases around the world, that I spoke with them, and they found that they were able to like take back their control in some way. And like Chrissy had described it as this like full circle healing moment. And so that conversation that I had with them a few years ago when we first met really, and I had that conversation on my podcast, Oral Arguments, and it was the first time I ever vocally said like, yeah, like honestly, it's something I could kind of fantasize about, but I never really thought I could. Just like as a victim who had my naked picture shared without my consent, there was a disconnect, until there wasn't anymore. And so I really sat on that for around a year or so, and I talked to different people, and I really thought about it, thought about the pros and cons. I was nervous that people wouldn't necessarily take me as seriously as like an advocate and an activist and somebody who talks about suffering from this violation. I thought that people would think that my violation like wasn't as valid that I had been through if now I did online sex work. But ultimately, I decided, you know what, if I don't do it, because at this point it's growing in me, right? Like as the months are going on, it's like becoming this bigger thing, like in my heart that like I have to do. And like, if I don't do this, I'm letting everybody else win. Like I'm letting everybody who trolls me, everybody who's ever slut shamed me, a society that wants to keep you in a box, like I'm letting all of them win because I want to do this. And so I did. And it's been over a year, and it's been like truly given me a sense of liberation that I couldn't have imagined. And I kind of like, I hate using the word empowerment sometimes because I think it can kind of get overused. And I also I don't think that like calling sex work empowering, like I don't think sex work in itself is empowering. It's a job, and for me, it happens to be empowering as a survivor of image-based sexual abuse because I'm able to reclaim my image and my body. And so professionally, I use my name across the board with everything. I do have strong boundaries there in terms of like I have my work, I have my OnlyFans, but I'm still me, right? Um, so I'm not like talking about OnlyFans at work. However, if I meet a survivor who tells me that they are a sex worker of any form, there's like a form of like leveling that I can do with them as an online sex worker that I've noticed really helps someone feel understood. Similarly to how when somebody tells me how alone they feel and isolated and they feel like they did something horrible, I'm like, listen, not to tell anybody else, like, I know how they're feeling, because I don't, but I've been on the other side of this conversation, so I might have a slight idea. And it's really helped me in terms of being able to connect with and understand the people that I work with.
Yeah.
I like how you said about how when your thoughts about empowerment and how, well, two things, how going through that experience and surviving through that experience, you became, through that afterward, you became more connected to the sex positive community and also sex worker community in New York. And then on the other side, um, speaking about how often we're seeing there's a percentage of folks who are working with people who have been experienced this type of abuse, but then also bringing in an anti-porn sentiment. And then as well, how I appreciate how frank you were about, for you, your experience, sex work has been empowering, but at the end of the day, it's a job. Hence, sex work is work, but it's not necessarily just empowering just because of what it is. I love the idea for me personally that it's a job like any other job. Like, being writing code can be empowering if I'm doing something that's creating something that's empowering other people. It can also just be a shitty ass job that I just don't feel like doing, like literally every other job can be. I really appreciate you being willing to share all that, and I can imagine it was not easy, especially being as young as you were, like relatively speaking, young compared to me. But I appreciate you sharing all that.
Yeah, there's got to be something super powerful about reclaiming your body and who has access to it. When you were talking about it, something that came to my mind was, we've been together like photo album days, like, and when we were young, like, we had some spicy photo albums, but I was freaked out about it. Like, I was so freaked out. Like, they were hidden in the closet under everything, but I was so freaked out that people were going to get access to them, or like when I die, my kid is going to get access to them. We just destroyed them. I mean, that's my bad, and we can't get that back. So like, that's what it made me think of. And we've been talking about making some more spicy albums and all of that. So yeah, and to that's kind of what it makes me think of, like, in my own personal space, just like taking ownership again, like, of yourself, and like, who says that this is wrong? Even if my kid does find it, even if maintenance comes in and sneaks through my shit, like, that's their problem, not mine. And why should we be robbed of something pleasurable and enjoyable because somebody might think a bad thing about me? Somebody might think I'm not this good girl. You know what I mean? So that's what it made me think of.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think about the this going back a long time too, when they found the naked pictures of me that, like,
who found naked pictures of you?
My boy, when he when he found the naked pictures of me, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this.
Exactly.
Like,
and then you just be like, no fucks.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what up,
I want to say that that's also a moment of education, because we have to teach our children that our bodies are not inherently
Exactly.
bad. And also, naked pictures aren't inherently a sexualized thing. I mean, I came up like in my early 20s doing figure modeling for art groups in schools around Chicago. And being naked in that space is totally different than like being naked on my OnlyFans, where the intent is like sexual stimulation, right? And so, if naked pictures are found by children, that's a time to, number one, set boundaries, because clearly they were going through things they shouldn't have been going through. So it's like, let me teach you that you don't go through people's things without permission. That's a violation of consent. How would you feel if I went through your personal things? So got to turn back around and then give them that education around like what this means and what this means for them when they get older and how they view their bodies. Because I think sometimes, we have a knee jerk reaction like, oh my God, and then it kind of spooks them, and we really don't understand the impact that that has on them, because we treat those photos as if they're inherently dirty, because we know the intent that we had when we took those photos, right? So education and using language that is age appropriate to be able to explain what they saw, and then setting that boundary and saying, don't do
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely
it.
appreciate that. I think that's a great way to approach like sex positive parenting and how valuable that is and these skills in that way. In this case, it wasn't, when I said my boy, it wasn't our child, though I think our child may have come across some stuff with me, but this was a friend of mine. I don't remember all the things, but yes, it's
It's
still the
still
same thing though, like you said, like
it's the
same thing. And
same
it's like
thing.
like
Yeah.
learning, teaching you to not be ashamed. Like I think there's so much there. And yeah, thank you, because I appreciate that insight, and thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to come back to Karneshia. Speaking of the OnlyFans thing, and you had recently expressed a desire to potentially try the OnlyFans modeling and having a more liberated expression of your sexuality. Do you mind sharing where you are on that journey?
Still on the fence about it. I had a conversation with Norma about it maybe a couple months ago, and she empowered me to heavily consider it still. And then shortly after that, like, I land a high profile client, and I'm like, oh, this might not be a good look. And it's like I'm constantly battling with that, going back and forth in my mind on how is my client gonna feel about if they see me doing this. So I'm still in the air. I'm still in the air. It's still a desire, but it's like I don't know.
Tyomi, go ahead.
So, as one that's also a part of the OnlyFans community, and I have been since 2019 as a digital sex worker, I have to say, like, I have my feet in a few different worlds, right? Like, I do some corporate things, I do some very public, like, public front facing things in media, and I'm in the sex worker community and adult industry to a degree, and so interestingly enough, like, I have a dedicated like group of fans who are there no matter what, right? I don't really promote my OnlyFans that deep, and when I do promote, I'm not putting out free content. I know a lot of um, content creators, they have their way of garnering attention, but what I understand is that when someone googles me, they are going
Right.
to find that stuff. And I have a separation, right? So I have Tyomi Morgan. If you google Tyomi Morgan, you're going to find all of my interviews. Like, I did a really good job at separating the SEO from Tyomi Morgan and Glamazon Tyomi. Glamazon Tyomi is where I do all of my sex work stuff. So I keep it like that because I need that separation. And if a client so happens to find it, we can have a discussion about it because it's not something that I'm ashamed of. And if a client happens to find it, if they are mature in their practice and they understand that it's two separate things, then it doesn't have to impact the work that we're doing. So really, in how you promote your content is important. Creating a pseudonym or like a moniker to do your sex work under that's separate. I know Norma uses her name across everything, but you don't have to do that. You don't have to use Karneshia. You can
Mm-hmm.
use something else and you brand that, and that just creates the separation, right? New Instagram page, new Twitter page, new TikTok page. I don't know if you can really promote that stuff on TikTok, but I'm not really in them TikTok streets like that. But it's possible, but take your time in really asking yourself, like, how do you want to show up in that OnlyFans space? What is it doing for you? What kind of people do you want to attract? Like, it's no different than, having started your other business where you're determining who you're serving, how you're serving them, and how you're showing up in your branding. It's the same thing, except it's just, some sexy stuff involved. And so if you just create the separation, um, it'll reduce that anxiety, and just always be prepared to not like defend what you're doing, but to have a conversation around it if a potential client feels uncomfortable. And also, like, that's none of their business. Like, that's literally your business with them, and your OnlyFans are not the same thing. So if they happen to stumble upon it, it's like, well, if you want to have a conversation about that, we can, but that's not why we're
Got
here.
you.
Like,
So
two
I'm
separate
basically
things.
just trying to create that balance, and and figure out how to separate my two identities.
I will say, I recently talked with Thea from Sex Talk Radio, and she told me she uses like her legal name, like Thea. It's like Thea Wayne for certain things, and then Thea Rose for all of her like sex positive like podcast stuff. And she's been able to separate that. And so I think that's a really good idea. Um, for me, I think I didn't really see it as an option because I have been like I've had trolls like looking for my nudes for so many years, and so I just wanted to do it under my own name and like fully just this is me. I also have legal resources that most people don't have, like working for this law firm. So there's a lot that goes into like safety wise and like reputation wise. I did have a conversation with Carrie, my boss, before I started the OnlyFans because I was just like, hey, I just want to like talk to you about this because you're gonna know, you know. And she was just like, okay. And, are you asking me for permission? And I was like, well, there might be clients who go on our firm's website, go on who's working here, they Google my name, and then they see I'm on OnlyFans, and then they don't want to work with us. Just like, okay.
I appreciate that. I know when we took Fly Media Productions to front facing officially be sex positive, we still had we still have a lot of mainstream clients, but we had 90% were mainstream, and so when we were going in that direction, we let them all know directly, individually, we're going to be starting, front facing officially being a sex positive agency and doing more stuff in the sex positive space, and what that might look like. And it was really encouraging hearing a lot of them saying similar to what y'all voice, like, well, that's not really our business as long as y'all ain't doing nothing unethical. And they're like, well, we know y'all to be ethical, so we're not really worried about that. But we didn't like to go to what I think you were saying, Tyomi. We weren't trying to defend it per se, but we were having that conversation and letting them know, because I thought, at least in our situation, it made sense, just out of point of respect, to let them know, hey, this is what we're doing, XYZ. And so, if you have any concerns, let's talk that out and everything too. I know it's like I've thought about it for myself, because coming from a background where I was both super desexualized and at the same time hypersexualized, being a black man growing up in very white spaces, I lost a lot of my autonomy around that. So I've thought about OnlyFans. Hence why we took those pictures years ago. And I've thought about OnlyFans because it's like wanting to like take control back for myself and have like a say in it in a way I never got to have. And I think that's partly why for me, I know I have a lot of privilege being a male in a very patriarchal society. But for me, I think that's why it's been so important that I just use my name across all the spaces, because I was so strict of control.
Can I just say, really quick on that, like as being a man whose experience is like, it really bothers me every single time there is a male celebrity whose nudes get leaked. The way that social media goes crazy looking for the content, laughing about the content, over-sexualizing them. It usually happens with Black men whose content is leaked. And
Yep.
As a society, I've seen a cultural shift around the way we talk about women's nudes who are leaked in general. We're not like Vanessa Hudgens all those years ago was getting shamed like crazy. And I like to think that society would react a little bit differently. But we haven't moved anywhere forward when it comes to men, and in particular, Black men whose content gets shared.
I very much appreciate that. I want to hear what
There's a historical context. There's a historical context to that. Like Black men's bodies aren't their own. Black men's bodies were owned, and that was never remedied. Like when chattel slavery was abolished in America, there was no program saying, "Hey, Black men, come over here. Let us like restore your humanity." Black men were continuously hunted down and brutalized and murdered. and it's still happening to this day. It's just been rebranded. I mean, even the term BBC in porn, like it's a rebranding of the Mandingo trope, which was used to sell more black male slaves, because the bigger the penis, the bigger, the stronger and more animalistic he was, and the more he was able to, breed more bodies to put on the slave, the block, the auction block. So this is why black men's nudes are not responded in the same way, because it's this idea that black men's bodies are public domain and public property. And until we're able to face the um, in, ingrained racism that is in this country, black men unfortunately will not be seen as humans as they are. And unfortunately, there is an imbalance of support for Black men when it comes to sexuality. There aren't a lot of spaces where Black men can feel safe to talk about sexuality. I think that Black men are probably even more repressed than women, and we don't talk enough about that. So it's really unfortunate, and we have a lot of work to do to dismantle that. But this topic is often sometimes met with defensiveness, because Black men have been programmed to believe that it's a compliment. So if those images are put out there, it's like, oh no, you should like this because everybody's looking at your body, everybody's praising your body. No, they don't have to like that, especially if it wasn't a consensual, dealing. So it can get really, the conversation can get really deep, but that's the reason why, and unfortunately, we're not focused enough on doing that work. I don't think that black men themselves even understand that that's a work that needs to be done. And so it's an uphill fight, to be honest.
I appreciate that. If for people, regardless of gender and identity, of all, asking all three of you, is there any things you would recommend they consider if they're thinking about exploring something like OnlyFans or content creation around sexuality? And
or anything that
yeah,
is just something that is of interest to them, but maybe makes them uncomfortable out of fear of stigma or shame from family, friends, colleagues,
and I guess we'll
the
start with
world.
you, Tyomi, because you're in the you're in that top corner square, and then go with you, Karneshia, if that's cool.
Yeah, I would suggest doing as much research as possible. So let's just take like kink, for instance, right? Let's say someone's interested in kink. Really finding those reputable sources to educate themselves about what it is at baseline, um, and then finding educators and people who are like certified in teaching others about kink to help them out a little bit, subscribing to their content, their blogs, their newsletters, just creating, finding those spaces that have already been created to safely explore those things, and aligning themselves with the community. And I say align because they might not feel comfortable yet stepping into community. And so if they can at least have conversations by commenting on their content on social media, or even sending an email and like a general inquiry about something, accessing any types of programs or curriculum that these individuals may have. The research is key, um, because sometimes, like, when you're sitting solo and you're thinking about something, all of the thoughts come up, and the the only way that what's real comes in is by finding real world examples of the thing, right? And like you said, positive reinforcement, positive affirmation, having those things will create a sense of safety for a person to like explore the next level. And so I'm always going to advocate for coaching. Coaching will save time. Coaching will help people to it'll mitigate some harm, because there's a lot that you can get into when you start doing research on this internet and you might go down some rabbit holes where you just don't want to be, and it could cause more fear than anything. So getting a coach can save time, and you have somebody who's literally a dedicated support system to help you along on the journey.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Oh, thank you so much. How about you, Karnisha? Same question.
Since I'm still figuring it out for myself, I will say from a family perspective, you have to let go of what they gonna think about you. Like I let go of that a long time ago. Like I don't care. I'm the rebel child anyway, so their opinion of me has never mattered to me. So they if they see anything online or even when I do my what do you call those photo shoots that's my picture. That was my picture for the flyer. Even when they saw that, like I know my mama wanted to say something. Boudoir, yes. But she didn't say anything to me because she's used to me exploring myself in this way now. So it's kind of you. First of all, you have to let go of any opinions that anybody might have of you, and start to be comfortable with yourself first. So that's what I'll say. As far as the other, I'm still figuring out how to overcome. I just gotta separate my two personalities, like she said earlier. That's all. That's it.
I'm telling you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate I appreciate how genuine you are about all this. Like you don't even know. I'm watching and I'm learning so much from you, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I will say I had to kind of train my mom on like how to like interact with me. I told her about the OnlyFans just because I knew that she Googles me and she was gonna like go crazy with like, oh my God, what is she doing on there? So I was like, listen, I'm starting an OnlyFans. This isn't a question, but it's so that you know. And just the content isn't as explicit as like I know you're thinking, even though that shouldn't matter, but like just to ease her own mind. Dad doesn't know yet. Fingers crossed he's not like gonna see this. Um, but I had to tell her like, hey, because I would get comments on like the pictures I was posting online, and I had to say like, listen, if we're gonna have a good relationship, this can't be a topic of conversation. And parents, like especially like if you have like more like conservative Latino parents, like they don't know the definition of boundaries. Like you say boundaries, the parents are like, excuse me. So I had to really frame it as like, if we're gonna get along, we cannot talk about this. Like, let's talk about anything else. And that helped a lot because eventually she's like, all right, fine. I want a relationship with you. You're my daughter. She learned to dial that back. So that helped me a lot. But yeah, I'll say like go in with eyes wide open, know what can and cannot be undone. But also like know resources in case something does go wrong. And really like just connect with yourself and your body as you make these decisions. I think that for me, one thing that I heard was like, are you doing this because, and I question myself on, are you doing this because you went through that trauma? Would you be doing this if you hadn't gone through it? And I think that question can really trip a person up if you've been through any form of sexual trauma and doing something more sexually explorative or like putting your sexuality out there. And at the end of the day, my answer to that is I have no idea if I would be doing this if I didn't go through that. That's not my life. So I'm not going to live my life wondering that or like thinking about what my life could have been. Right now, the only thing I have control of is doing what I want to do now. And so part of that was like doing a lot of healing work before I ever even considered doing the OnlyFans. Got connected with my body, learned how to listen to my gut feeling so that I could listen to that gut feeling telling me, yes, do this. So there's a lot of like internal work that went
Then you're in the
before.
driver's seat. Yep, and then you're in the driver's seat.
Yeah,
and you're in
remembering that you
of
have
your
control over it. So like specifically if you're doing OnlyFans, like you can set your boundaries. You're only doing this or you're not doing that. I always tell my subscribers, like, I don't mind if you ask questions because, like, it's okay for them to push my boundaries a little bit because then I can think about it and ask myself, do I feel comfortable making that kind of video, doing this on camera? Sometimes it's a yes and I hadn't thought about it before, and sometimes it's a no. And that in itself, like the thinking about boundaries and deciding and like making those decisions and having people respect that can be healing in itself.
Thank you so much for that. I have a follow-up question that we hadn't actually planned for, but there was a post on LinkedIn recently about somebody's uncle going on their OnlyFans, which is just creepy as fuck. And it brought up the reading through the comments on the post and then reading through the person's post. It brought up the idea of people who are sex positive creators who should and should not be consuming their content. Do y'all have any feedback on that to enlighten the viewers, especially in a spot like LinkedIn, where they may not actually be thinking so critically about this, but outside of the workspace, maybe they're consuming content, but they're not necessarily thinking about the autonomy and respect for the creator and that kind of thing, and crossing relationship boundaries, whether it's a coworker, a friend, a neighbor, a relative, and obviously things that there shouldn't be any question, but clearly they be crossing lines. I think that is a whole different problem. I think that's predatory in a whole different way. So we don't need to. I don't. If you don't want to, we don't need to get into that, because I think that's just wrong, and we shouldn't have to tell you. No one should have to. You should know that if you're a grown ass adult.
I'll just say, like, yeah, that's super inappropriate, and of course, like, family members shouldn't be watching. I do have subscribers who are like guy friends, and I've talked to them about it and been like, listen, I don't care as long as like you can keep the boundaries straight between like what goes on OnlyFans versus in real life. Like, that's not gonna ever translate to anything in person. Sometimes people tell me that like we know each other. I actually really appreciate when they do. And sometimes they'll offer to tell me who they are. And I say, like, yeah, you can. It's up to you. But as long as you can keep the boundaries straight, and the privacy goes both ways, right? Like, I'm not going to tell people who you are as long as you don't ever share my content. So it is a balance. At the end of the day, you don't actually know who's subscribing to you, so you can't prevent it.
Nope.
But you could just be like upfront about your boundaries.
I will echo that. That's the only thing that you can do, because you cannot police or control anybody else's behaviors. So you do have to double, triple down on your boundaries, because again, especially if you're living in two worlds, like sex worker world, civilian world, like you have relationships outside of being a sex worker, and it will happen where people who will come across your content, especially if you are popular, especially if they search that world a lot. You make content that they resonate with, they're going to come across your content at some point. And I think that it's actually healthy to say, hey, this is this side of me, erotic, cool. I do this for work. I do this for self-expression. And I'm your homie, or I'm your coworker, or whatever. So if you want to be over here supporting me, this is cool, but keep it over here. Don't talk to me at work about my OnlyFans, or else I'm going to HR. Like, don't,
100%.
because this is not that. So you have to be strong on your boundaries. Family, that's just fucking weird. I just have to put that out there. That is extremely inappropriate.
Yeah.
Incest
Thank you.
is not something that I subscribe to. I don't like any of that. I know that there are people who play around with that as a fetish or whatever. That's, for me, hard no. It is a hard no. And I would hope that none of my family members have ever stumbled across. But I will say, I've had family members follow me on Snapchat. I blocked them. I blocked them on social media, period, because I'm like, you don't need to be seeing what I'm out here doing. And some of them know what I do, but they keep it respectful. They're not subscribing to my content. So the boundaries is where it has to be, because we just really don't know what people are doing outside of us. And some people change their screen names. Some people have like burner accounts that they do things under. And so you don't even know that it's them. So if they do have the courage to say, hey, I've been secretly subscribing to your OnlyFans or Loyal Fans or whatever it is, that's cool. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's set the boundary and keep it moving.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I wanted to ask y'all in closing, and I didn't want to cut you off, Karneshia. If you had anything to add, you just jump right in and cut me off, no problem. But I didn't want to put you on the spot either. I wanted to ask you, like, in closing, the three of you, can you, and obviously Sherri, you too, can y'all share just a closing thought about the good girl trap, either, things people can think about, either resource maybe that folks who are looking to find their way through it and navigate it, anything that you want to share, like what have you, because I'm sure folks watching would really appreciate it. I'm super appreciative of this conversation. And I'll just start with you again, Tyomi, because you're in that spot.
So, coming to the realization that we've been lied to, that's the first thing. And secondly, you don't have to perform a particular way in order to be accepted by people. And if that is the case, if somebody's love and acceptance is contingent upon you behaving how they want you to behave, take a moment to ask yourself, is this a relationship that is really helpful for me? Is this a relationship that's supportive of my needs and supportive of my life journey? And then from there, ask yourself what you do with that, you know? But I highly suggest therapy, highly suggest a coach as well, because therapy is going to help you to deal with the past trauma that basically implemented the good girl syndrome. Coaching will help you where you're at right now and to help you reach your goals of being empowered and being liberated from that. So you need both. You need a therapist to help you with the past and a coach to help you with the present and then helping you flow into the future.
Thank you so very much. And how about you, Karneshia?
Um, I think I think she hit the points perfectly because therapy is really gonna help you to discover yourself. Um, and I need a coach, so I think I think I found one.
Yeah, word.
So I think those are great points, though.
Thank you so much. And almost finally, because we'll close out with Sherri. Norma, how about yourself?
Yeah, agree with everything else said. And I'll just say, like, if you find yourself having like hesitations or like being really unsure about like whether you want to do something, whether that's OnlyFans or anything in general, dating non-monogamously or exploring your sexuality or whatever it might be, like really question yourself on like what is that holding you back, and is it something internal or external? um, if it's internal, maybe it is something you don't want to do for whatever reason. If it's external, like it might be a societal thing or the people in your life, and that's fair. That's not like, it's not to say those things don't matter, but at the end of the day, like, can you get to a point where you don't care and that you're able to take in the bullshit that's going to come, the adversity that comes? Because also, like, if you are a sex worker or any other like openly sex positive person, you're going to get a lot of shit. So like, be prepared for that and be ready to just roll it off of you and say like, well, I'm happy and this is making me more whole.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you so much for that, for your insights on that. And how about yourself, Shay?
I would just add to that too, to don't do anything
Mhm.
before you're ready to. And like to what Norma was saying earlier, know what can't be undone. And then find a community of support and cheerleaders for the life that you want to live and the person you want to be, whether that be a friend or a group of friends or an online community or in-person community. Find people that uplift you and support who you want to be.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Do y'all want to each tell us where folks can find you online if they want to come and find you in a good way?
Yeah, we're going to start with you, Norma, since you're in the top corner.
So on Instagram, I'm Norma Buster _. Norma Buster everywhere else. I have a podcast called Oral Arguments, which you can follow on Instagram at Oral Arguments Podcast. And had Sherri and Reuben on the last season. And also cagoldberglaw.com and across social media for our law firm if you want more resources on that.
Thank you so much. And how about you, Tyomi?
You can find me on Instagram at Real Glamazon Tyomi because I have a lot of fakes out there, just so y'all know. So Real Glamazon Tyomi on Twitter or X, Glamazon Tyomi. I actually have a blue check. It's legacy, but I guess it doesn't matter anymore. But if you forget anything, you can literally put Tyomi Morgan in Google and you can find all of my platforms.
Excellent. And how about you, Karnisha?
You can find me on Instagram at K.Shantel Official. And my business is Access for Accessibility, which works on making spaces more accessible, more importantly, event spaces. And that is accessforaccessibility.com, like you can see on my headliner here. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
So thank you so much. And I guess we should sign out. You can find us. You want to tell folks where they can find us?
What? That's your job.
Yeah, it is my job.
You're really too much fun playing with all the buttons.
I am pushing buttons. So if you want to find out more content like this, you can head on over to sextechandchill.com, and we're on social media, SexTech and Chill. If you'd like to keep up with Sherri and I's journey, you can do that at exoflyduo or exoflyduo.com. And thank you all for joining us. We can't thank you enough, and we'll see you next time. Peace. And yeah, it's been real, y'all. Bye.